Welcome back to We Should Be Working. My name is Zach Hendricks, and with me is Jeff Finley. Jeff, how are you doing this week?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. I spent the week working on my website and getting lost in the techie stuff, and wrote my newsletter about that. But how are you?
I'm jealous of that because web work is some of my least favorite work to do, and some of the work that I feel the least confident in doing, which is probably why I don't like doing it very much because I'm not very good at it. And so it's one of the art forms that I need to do better at. And my website is in a bad disarray, and one of these days I'm going to get to it. So
Is that
um,
why we say Zach's website link TBA at the bottom of
because
every show?
it's so bad. I should just put it in there anyway so people can go there. Because I mean, it is live. It's out there. I'll put it up this time, so people can come and find me if they want to see what I do. But there's no way to like interact with me. I don't even have my business up on Instagram or anything like that. Um, which was interesting. I went to here in Colorado. There's some people started a long time ago. They call it a MoGraph meetup, motion graphics meetup. And so about once a month, motion graphics people from Colorado will go meet at the back of this brewery. And sometimes they have presentations. Otherwise, it's just a way for people to get together. And there was about five or six other video guys in the same state as me, like, "Oh, I don't have Instagram. My website's under construction. It's been under construction for a year." So apparently it's something inherent in the video world that we hate making websites. So,
Well, hey, I was just watching a video tutorial on how to sell clients on website design and what to do and what not to do. So, hey, maybe I'll design you a website, Zach, or I should get into the market of designing video guys who don't know how to, or don't care about building a website. I'll do it for them.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I'm doing
Yeah,
great.
there's your market is video guys that hate doing web design. So I don't know what they're doing. Like I remember my wife who she's got her own thing going on and she's got her blog and all this. She's got a WordPress that she messed around with. And I was having to ask her, I'm like, "Do you think you could show me how to use WordPress?" And I'm like, I know WordPress is supposed to be easy to use. I've just never sat down and learned it. So I've got like super, super basic like HTML where I'm like, throw a container here, and then the video is in there, and then that's it. It's just stark, stark, stark. But I was like, in the video world, all I really need is my portfolio. My portfolio is just one frame of video. So the rest I don't care about. People are only going to hire me for that one video sitting in there. So I can get away with it, but really I
hmm
should look a lot more professional. So,
Hey, you just need a one-page personal website that says, here's your name, contact info, here's your demo, and like that's it.
exactly. And that's kind of what I get too caught up in the design of that. Sometimes I'm like, Zach, you're forgetting what this is about. It's about the video. Get it out there, get it simple, get it clean, get it easy. If it's simple and clean, that's good enough.
hmm
And then put it up there. So yeah, I mean, my website design is still in Muse. I don't know if you ever heard or messed around with that.
Muse,
Adobe
that's,
Muse.
oh no, I don't even, do they even still make that software?
No, they don't. Um, it has not been supported for quite a while now. For a couple of years, I think they stopped support in like 2020.
Oh, okay.
But there's still a lot of people strong out there using it. So I was just on a Muse forum with for a problem when they updated the latest version of Windows and Creative Cloud. It caused a error in Muse, and Muse wouldn't launch, and so I had to go do this workaround to get Muse to launch, so I could even get my website back up. Um,
On
the
face.
last week or so, because I was trying to update my demo reel, and I was like, "Oh no, I can't even open up the program now. This is not good." But I loved Adobe Muse because for somebody like me, it was like a WYSIWYG editor where it
hmm
felt like Photoshop, where I was just designing stuff, laying it out, and then I was like, that's my website. Perfect. None of this like, oh, it's breaking it this way, and oh, that's not lining up, and now I got to go mess around with the CSS, and oh, now the HTML broke the CSS and all that. I could just put stuff the way that I wanted it to, and it just worked. But I don't know why apparently it was not very popular though. So
Well, was
nobody
that
wants,
they bought Dreamweaver, right? They
yeah.
bought Macromedia Dreamweaver and then they turned it into Muse. Is that what happened? They
I
rename it
think,
Muse or something?
well, for me, what I think, no, so Dreamweaver I think is still around. Well, maybe not, but I think Muse was much more of they got Dreamweaver, but Dreamweaver was even for a what you see is what you get type of an editor, it was not great at that. To me, Dreamweaver really, you're getting the most out of Dreamweaver if you were a coder. Um, because that exact thing, you would start putting stuff in there, but when you previewed your website, you're like, why is it not staying? And it didn't have a way for you to easily make CSS inside of Dreamweaver if you weren't a coder or didn't know any bit of code. And so I think that that was their answer for Muse is that like, well, what we thought Dreamweaver would be, we'll make Muse be. So if you don't know anything about coding or web design, you can get into Muse and make yourself a website. But then I would be willing to bet as well is that people liked that and thought that it was good. But then as, websites like Wix and Squarespace started getting more popular,
Mhm.
that nobody was coming to it. Adobe is usually a professionals and the non-professionals are in like Lightroom or something like that. But most Adobe products are for people that kind of know what they're doing. And so that product just everybody would prefer to be in Dreamweaver because they had way more control. But for people like me, it was perfect. Where I was like, Wix is a little bit too much control that I can't get it the way that I like it. But I'm not powerful enough with HTML and all of that and JavaScript to make myself an appropriate website inside of Dreamweavers.
Yeah, I
Whenever
don't.
I did that before, it was a mess.
Yeah, I don't hear anybody using Dreamweaver anymore. But what everybody uses now is Figma, Webflow, Framer, or
Yeah.
or Adobe XD, which not people aren't even using that anymore. But like Webflow and Framer are the go-tos for web designers who are just building like a static website for like a restaurant client or video guy.
Oh, really?
Not a WordPress site. WordPress is still the most popular solution, and then of course there's Squarespace and Wix and all that, and themes that you can use to make that easier. Like you don't even need to know any code to just go buy a theme and just start putting your content in there. You just like choose your logo, choose your colors, choose your fonts, and you're good to go. You don't have to do any customization nowadays on WordPress.
Oh,
But
crazy.
for Figma, which is the design software that's most web designers use these days, it's like I don't know if you've ever used it, but it's like I used to design websites in Photoshop and Illustrator before
Mhm.
Figma, and then I kind of got out of the web design game for a long time, and then now coming back into it, everybody uses Figma. It's like one of the most robust, intuitive web design experiences for designing a UI. And then they can transport that to Framer, which is like you can almost copy and paste it into something like that. And then Framer is basically a what you see is what you get editor. It's kind of like what Dreamweaver should
Was
be.
supposed to be. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can directly publish from that to your website. And it does animation, JavaScript, all sorts of stuff that you can do by just clicking, changing settings, customizing it. It's made
It
for
sounds like that's what I need.
non-coders. It's made for designers, not coders.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, see that sounds much more of what I need and maybe what Muse was giving me before because yeah, I use Figma and I know that a lot of people use it for web or UI UX stuff to map out all the different steps of hey, it's here's how it's going to go and here's the flow through the site, but I like Figma, but I've never used it for that. I always use it for video concepting and storyboarding, which it's a great tool
Hmm.
for that
Hmm.
of like as we're trying to come up with concepts for a video we can keep concept one over here and all the ideas that we have for it and then it can slowly kind of map out as far as and then we'll build our storyboard all of these shots through and then really what that turns into for us is a pitch deck that then turns into a more robust storyboard as we start narrowing stuff down with clients and all of that but it's a great like whiteboard tool for me that kind of then narrows everything down that I can use throughout the process. Because then at the end, like I think the last shoot that I did, we were out there and we had a big cork board up there and we printed out frames from Figma that was kind of our storyboard. We put it up there to be like, did we get that shot, that shot, that shot, that shot? And so then we kind of even took our Figma and made a real life Figma that was on a big, huge whiteboard so we could see it easier as we were shooting. But yeah, I love that tool So video wise, it's great, but yeah, I've never used it for web, which is I think what most people are using it for.
Right, right. Yeah, I know. It's cool because it's like it's got a lot of similarities to Illustrator, and you can just the keyboard shortcuts are the same. If you're good in that, you can
Oh,
just
really?
yeah. But it's more intuitive for web design. It's so much faster. I'm like, I can't believe I used to design websites in Photoshop, or it's like,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh, well, and now when you see that, the duplicating the artboard and all of that, oh, okay, here's new artboard, and then you're kind of going
yeah,
down the row and all that. Yeah, Figma seems like a much better tool, and I'm hearing more and more. It was like 3 years ago. Personally, I was not in web, but I didn't hear anybody talking about Figma really. And then all of a sudden now everybody is like, "Oh, you want to get into a Figma? You want to get into a Figma?" It was right around 2020
hmm
is when I started messing around with Figma. And it was one client was like, "Hey, can we do a Figma?" And they're like, "Do you know how to use it?" I was like, "Of course I do. I
of
love
course.
Figma." As we all do, we lie to the client, say we know how to do things that we don't, and then we figure it out later. Um,
Get yourself into
but
trouble with that one. Like, I
I
know from
know
experience.
I've done that before. Unfortunately, I've always been able to weasel my way out of it, but there was one that I almost didn't think that I did, and it was building some Snapchat filters. They're like, "Oh yeah, you know how to build Snapchat filters?" I was like, "Of course I do. It's easy peasy." Like I don't even have a clue. And I said yes, and I was like, I don't even know if I can get the software, how hard the software is to use. Fortunately, it was pretty easy, but the process getting through it was difficult with the first client. So, but after that, I was like, actually, and then I did a few filters afterwards, which surprisingly, those jobs paid okay. You would think building a filter for Snapchat would be like, oh, we'll give you $200, but no, I made pretty good money
Oh,
a few
nice.
years ago making Snapchat filters, which was weird. Anyway, work wise, I wanted to check in with you because yeah, you did send out a newsletter this week talking about your website, web design, all of that, and see what have you been working on or any details in there that you want to share, any other updates with any other clients or anything like that you've been working on this last week.
No, I feel like the main trajectory that I need to take is, well, me personally, it's like my website is my home, my hub, my business card. It's where most of my sales come from through the products that I sell. So I'm like, I want to refine that and make that better. But I don't really exactly have a pathway of how I'm going to do that. I've got ideas for how I want to redesign it, like a new brand. I have, but I've been struggling a little bit with figuring out if I want to use WordPress still. I've used it for decades, or do I want to go with something like Framer or Webflow because that's where you can make it a lot more customized and make it look more cool. But I've got an e-commerce shop, I've got a podcast, I've got books, I've got all sorts of content that I just feel like those websites are more geared towards marketing pages or a landing page for a business. I've got a ton of content that I need to manage and it's already in WordPress. So I feel like I need to redesign it with the future of WordPress in mind to stay on there. And one, without getting too in the weeds with all of this stuff, WordPress is leaning into full site editing. They've added these new features that a lot of these old page builder plugins don't support, or it's kind of like theme developers are having an issue where WordPress is changing its core features to be more like the page builders, and the page builders are like now, of course, sort of in competition with WordPress's own ability to edit your site and customize
Oh,
the look
gotcha.
and feel of it. Now, well, to be honest, I don't really feel like talking too much about this stuff. It's very technical and boring for the
Oh, sure.
podcast, I feel like. But that's where I'm kind of in the weeds of like figuring out what I'm going to do and then designing it and wireframing it. And, it's early stages, basically.
Well, and that stuff, I think everybody, which I think for you, it's a somewhat unique struggle though as well, is that for creatives, a lot of creatives in today's day and age, we're not just one thing anymore. And more the world is kind of demanding us to be multiple things. However, for you, I feel like you're almost like a tree there, where you've got you've got some solid roots and all of that, and then the tree trunk is you, is Jeff. But then what are the different branches of Jeff? There's the music, there's the design, there's the book, there's the podcast, there's all this. Is that you've got this great branch of things, and so yeah, then that can be a little bit of like, all right, how do I control this as one thing when I have five different things, but they're all connected back through me. So
Yeah. And
that's a
figuring out what it
difficult.
is that I want my website to do, um,
Yes.
how to showcase all my creations in a way that is supportive, but also all of we're doing this podcast. We're talking about a lot of things that are abstract, that are mystical, that are spiritual, that are things that don't necessarily get communicated so easily on a website. And I have also dreams or ambitions of stepping more into that direction and kind of away from being the illustrator designer person, but more into the sort of mentor, for lack of a better word, spiritual teacher or something.
Sure.
I don't really know if I'm supposed to do that or not, because every avenue that I think where people do spiritual teachings, I'm not really drawn to doing that. Like, so I don't know. I think that I'm still this creator who's also got a voice and has, a blog and ways to express my spiritual beliefs, but I want to open it to go that direction a little bit more, whether that's through mentorship or coaching or something like that. But I don't really know. So I'm always in a
What
struggle of like who I am and how I'm supposed to present online without making myself feel like a commodity. Blah blah blah.
I think that, yeah, and that's always something that I struggle with as well, and talked a little bit in here also. I think a lot of people do, and it's tough. It's weird. I think most people understand that, but yet we don't do it. Meaning that I go out there and I go, look, I understand that you have multiple skills and all of this, and that makes sense to me. However, then if I market myself out, I'm like, well, I don't want them to get confused that I'm not this thing over here, I'm this thing over here, and this is what I want to do. And they go, oh, are you this or are you that? Which one is it? Why am I hiring you for this if you're that thing over there? That then it's hard to find that. But I like that you brought up spiritual leader, your mentorship, coaching people in that arena. Because I do want to pick back up. I think it's a perfect segue. I want to pick back up our conversation that we had a couple weeks ago of when you're on your road trip and your spiritual journey, because I remember reading a lot of your blog back then, or maybe that's even when the blog started, or your newsletter, I guess I should say, not necessarily your blog, but I feel like right around there is maybe when I started messing around with your newsletter. And for me, I remember reading it like a novel. It was really interesting, like jumping from camp to camp to camp type of, as you were like figuring out things that, now I'm sure, you would be a great leader for, but it was fun seeing the beginning of that journey. As I went around, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have no clue what's going on in the world. It's kind of how I felt. I was like, Jeff is really getting to see some really niche stuff that's going down there. I was like, I didn't even know that existed. And one of them was forgive me if I put this out there wrong, and you can correct me, and I think this was on the road trip, was, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call it the cuddle camp,
Okay. Okay.
where it seemed to be like almost like a retreat. And then there was a leader, and for lack of a better term, she was a cuddle leader. And I'm just kind of curious, like, do you remember how you found them, what that was like, the people, and maybe some takeaways that you took away from all of that? Because I'm sure for a lot of people, that's a pretty, as I want to get to on a lot of things, it might be for the layman a very out there thing, but I'm hoping for the more, spiritual people that are listening to us, that they can go, oh, okay, finally some stuff for me in here. But if for guys like me that are not into that want to know more, what that was like.
Okay, so the cuddle thing. All right. That's so funny you asked that. I forgot about it. But so before I even went on my road trip, I think my mom sent me a video, like a TED Talk type video of this woman named Samantha Hess, and she was a professional cuddler, and she gave an inspiring talk about how she, after her divorce, she felt like she was touch starved, deprived of physical intimacy. And she went on her own healing path. And then she found it so valuable skin to skin contact, platonic, non sexual, skin to skin, like loving contact without any attachments was really healthy for her path of healing and growth. So she wanted to provide that in some ways to people, and she ended up building a business out of it. I forget what she called it, but she had a place where people would go. They would schedule appointments, much like a massage therapist, but it would just be sort of platonic cuddling, where you just are being held by somebody for like a half an hour, and like you can cry or do whatever it is that you need to do, and then that's it, you know. And so I thought it was a really cool idea. I just thought it was funny. So I interviewed her on my podcast. I think this was 2015 or something like that.
Okay.
We had a
Sounds about right.
conversation. And so anyway, that was that. But I went on my road trip, and then I went to Austin. And when I moved to Austin, I looked for groups, meetup groups, things to attend, try to get involved in the community. And I was talking with some girls on OkCupid at the time, and one of them was the leader, a facilitator of Authentic Relating Games Empath Edition. So this was Authentic Relating Games is like a kind of a nationwide thing that people do in different kind of different cities, where you get together in a group and you learn how to talk about nonviolent communication. You know, there's this concept called circling, whereas a person's in the middle, they've got the hot seat, and then everybody else around them kind of gives them their undivided attention and asks questions about that person, and then they get to talk and be seen and heard and validated. So it's very much good for relationship building and for people recovering from trauma and things like that, to kind of learn to express themselves and be heard. Introvert people attend this kind of thing. So
Gotcha.
anyway,
Okay.
so this girl, she ran a version of that for empaths, which are basically more highly sensitive people who are more spiritually inclined, emotionally inclined, and it was less threatening than typical authentic relating games, which can feel very exposing. Like when you're on the hot seat, people are grilling you with like questions. It's like based off of concepts like radical honesty, where you tell the truth and you feel uncomfortable. You lean into your fears, you lean into your discomforts, and you grow personally. But it can be very threatening for somebody who's not really ready for that intensity. So anyway, I went to her group, and within that group, you know, through weeks of connecting through the authentic relating games format, we would go out, and then we would hang out together at one of her houses, or one of these people's houses, and then we would do authentic relating game stuff there. But then we would also start doing more physical intimacy. So we would start cuddling with each other. So we would they called it a cuddle puddle, and
even better. What a great name.
And you know, I was kind of new to this. I wasn't, you know, so I was kind of like, oh, this is cool. Like I'm single. I'm getting out of my divorce. This is a safe way to kind of experience physical touch without getting into a relationship with somebody or making it sexual or making it weird. There's a lot of strict rules about like what can be done, what can't be done. You know, clothes are on. You know, so anyway, there was an event that was going on, a Cuddle Party event that was facilitated by like this author who wrote a book about cuddling and about like the power of cuddling or something like that. So she kind of came in and she led this event, and then so there's a bunch of strangers there, and she lays out the rules, and we all like follow the format and then have a really great night. And so that's sort of the introduction to the cuddle stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm curious about, I imagine, and maybe this is a stupid question because it's so obvious. Did they talk a lot about it all, as far as, you know, I would think the reason why that makes sense to me is that as a parent, they talk a lot about, as soon as your child is born, skin to skin contact is extremely important. It's a really good bond to, you know, especially for moms, especially, you know, get your baby skin to skin contact. That's a great way to start off that quote unquote relationship of trust and caring and all of that, it just seems inherent that even though we're not babies anymore, that's kind of a just very primal thing for us, where we can feel safe, feel welcomed, feel, you know, just exactly that. It's a safe spot to work through whatever you might be going through. Is that kind of the intention, is trying to create a safe space for whatever emotion you had? Like you said, you need to cry or something, or maybe it's even the opposite of you just had a great thing and it's a celebratory way to be like, this feels great now, I'm feeling an embrace of ways to work through emotions. Is that the intention?
Yeah, that's absolutely the intention. anybody that was involved in these things also was involved in other emotional healing related things, either also tantra, which is like a spiritual kind of sexual practice. So there was, but the cuddling specifically was non-sexual.
Sure. Yeah.
But the people who organized it also ran sexual groups too. So
Gotcha.
if you wanted to take it to the next level and basically have an orgy, then
Yes.
you could
Oh,
get
really?
into that too.
Gotcha.
But see, this is where it gets weird, you know? So like I remember when I was talking about this at WMC Fest, like after I came back from my time in Austin, I went back to WMC and they were interviewing me on the stage and they're like, "So you went to a sex party?" And I was like, "Yep." And like the crowd is like all laughing and like, "What the hell, Jeff?" You know. And I wrote about this on my blog and I talked about it in my podcast back then. But it was very strange for me to go to a sex party, but I wouldn't have gone to these things if it wasn't facilitated by people that I felt like were really, really smart about boundaries and consent and
Yeah.
like authenticity and non. It's not creepy. It's not violating anybody. It's so it's a safe way to explore this stuff, like outside of a romantic based relationship where there's expectations on, are you going to be my girlfriend? Are you going to be my boyfriend? You know, like where there's a lot of unwritten rules and assumptions
Sure.
made between people. So it's like you can't go explore sexuality in a relationship without like hurting someone's feelings, but like you can go explore sexuality and touch in an organized setting like this that's kind of supporting your health and your like a lot of this is people who are there are recovering from like sexual assault and violence and stuff like that. So they're kind of tiptoeing themselves back in there to learn how to experience being touched without having a trigger reaction. Or
Sure.
if they do have a trigger reaction, they could have a safe place to feel it and explore it. So sexual healing and physical touch necessary, like what you talked about. It's primal, like a primal thing for people, and we're touch deprived. You know, that's how it was discussed back then.
Well, and I remember that, and that, and I think the way that you describe that is great, and that kind of juxtaposition of saying it on stage that most people have this perception. I would say, modern America, you say that and like, oh, sex party, like it's like some eyes wide shut swingers party, and people are swapping partners and all this, and this guy's tied up over there, and she's doing this. And you're like, that's not really what that was about. And so while, yeah, ha ha ha, there's a joke about it, but it's like, it's not really, like you said, there is not a place, well, there are, but people don't think that there are places where it's like, where do you go to get a question answered? Or if you need to be, like you said, rehabilitated, somebody with sexual trauma or something, that it's like, we don't talk about that. We don't discuss that. We don't have good ways to do that in a Western society. And I would imagine that there are not a lot of people that would need or want to go to something like that. I mean, maybe that would change if our society was a little bit different. But then so it becomes this weird niche thing that like, oh, Jeff went to an orgy. It's like, that's not really what happened.
Yeah.
Type of a thing. But I think that it's kind of a fascinating thing because I would imagine for people like that, that it's not something that you're doing for a long period in your life. I would imagine a lot of people that come to these places, you're there for a little bit of time. And when you're able to achieve what you need to achieve out of it, you're not going back because it's not meant to go be like, we're not coming to do this for a weekend fling fun. Like that's not necessarily what it's for. But so I imagine that, and I don't want you to feel like you're violating the privacy of what happened there or anything like that. But I am kind of curious if you want to talk about it, and if you want to, that's great. And if not, that's fine too. Some of the people that you met there and some of the relationships or experiences without, we don't have to go into detail on any of it, but I'm kind of curious about the people, the teaching, and kind of what you took away from any of those experiences. Like you said, you're meeting with an empath, and whether it turned into that or something else, what that time in your life meant, and do you think you got out of it what you needed to get out of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, it's interesting talking about it now because I've read so many things about like what can go wrong at things like this, that
Sure.
like how these are great entry points for cults and for abusive dynamics. And
Sure.
it's also closely related to like the polyamory community. And there's so many people that make fun of this type of situation. I mean, so it's interesting to go back and relive it and answer questions from somebody like you who's asking in good faith and not asking as like sort of a gotcha or a way to sort of poke fun at like anybody who needs to go to these things, as like anybody who does is probably some sort of weirdo or creep. Or I mean, there are certainly people like that who are
Sure.
drawn to going to an event like this, and they're usually pretty easy to detect when if you feel uncomfortable around a guy who's like at this event and he's trying to get something that you can tell is wrong. But what they are good at coaching the people who are on the receiving end is to learn how to trust their feelings of like no in their body when somebody is kind of pushing them to do something that they don't want to do. They're supposed to learn how to speak up for themselves and say no, and learn to honor that their feelings of revulsion, or I'm getting a creepy vibe from this individual, learn how to trust themselves. And I think victims of sexual assault and have been conditioned to not trust themselves and to think that when they say no, that they're being wrong, that the person needs something from them. They need to, like in relationships, when somebody is like being aggressive and then they say no, they go along with it and then they regret it. They're often felt like they're the problem, So it's a way for people to recover from that type of scenario. So
Sure.
anyway, I think I'm getting a further from your point. What was your question again, Zach?
No, no, no. I was just curious as far as you know, the takeaway and I think that you answered some of that in a way, but it does seem like you're going to meet some very unique people there. And so for me personally, that would be, I don't know if that's a situation that I would feel comfortable in, that I'm like, this feels very weird, awkward, but respecting what it was for, it seems like there would be some really interesting people there, or getting out of it. And was there a lot of, I mean, I would imagine that I know the answer to this question is yes, that yes, it was uncomfortable at times. But at the same time, it's like if you have this teacher that is kind of like able to recognize that, because like I said, I'm not saying this in a way that it was like, hey, I'm going to my first one next week. I don't necessarily have an interest in it, in doing it
Hmm.
myself, but I'm interested in kind of the people and how they run it. So did it feel pretty well respected? Like, hey, I have this nice teacher. They're taking care of me. I feel safe in all of this. Or was there a lot of like, this is so uncomfortable and I know I'm supposed to be learning how to say no, but I'm really not, but I'm going to go along with this experience and see how it goes. I'm like, oh, actually, that was kind of the point. I did go along with it. I tried something new and I got this out of it. And kind of like, what was your takeaway from some of that?
Well, my experience, I only went to two of these events. One was the Cuddle Party and one was the Sex Party. And I had a really good experience at both of them. Now, if I kept going, I probably would have discovered more things about this group, about the organizers, about the people who attend, who's got good intentions, who's got a weird
Yeah,
agenda.
the creeper.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but I met some really great people there, and I was at a time in my life when I was really open to exploring like a forbidden part of my being, which was my sexuality. And so I was just wanting to open up and express parts of myself that I felt very ashamed about. I felt like I was ashamed just to be a man and to have sexual desire, because
Sure.
kind of we're growing up in a culture where like if you're a man and you have sexual desire, you're kind of like already a predator and you kind of have to convince people that you're not a predator. So like I have issues. I had issues with myself with my sexual desire and learning what I wanted and what I liked, and trying to explore that and having the safe place to do that. So I met some great people. I met a few sex workers who taught me a lot, just as far as like talking to them and learning their experience and learning what they have gone through. There was I can share this one story. So there's a company that was based in Austin called One Taste. There's a documentary about them on Netflix that you should
Oh,
watch.
okay.
It's kind of about the cult of One Taste, how it started off as this female empowerment thing, and it turned into this like multi-level marketing scheme and really damaging for people. But there was an event called Introduction to One Taste, and the whole concept is they've got a woman who's positioned on her back, and then another person is stimulating her for 15 minutes, and in this like very regimented specific way. There's not a lot of room for freestyling, and it's not supposed to be sexual. It's just supposed to be like a way to empower women to kind of feel and experience sexual pleasure and have somebody facilitate and do that and kind of give. And that's the dynamic. And so they have this like the female orgasm is like paramount. That's like their brand. And then they build a whole business off of creating situations for women to experience this. They do it in the morning. They do it as part of their yoga routine. They'll do what they call oming situation. So orgasmic meditation. That's their whole shtick. So I went to an intro workshop just to kind of see what this was. So I got to meet some individuals who were attending, and I met. That's where I met this one sex worker. She was a massage therapist. She had a lot of clients. She did escorting, and she told me about how some of her clients were like CEOs and business owners in the neighborhood, and some of them had really wicked proclivities and fetishes and stuff like that she had to deal with. So I'm like, this is so fascinating to get to talk to somebody who's got this experience. Like, wow. So anyway, I felt like the whole vibe at the One Taste workshop was kind of culty anyway, because at the end of it, they would have this upsell where they try to like get you to pay for the next course, the next class.
Gotcha.
And they're like, they go around with a clipboard and say, so would you like to sign up for the next? We've got level 1 certification, level 2, level 3. And it also just had a weird kind of a, like, it's strange when you mix sexuality with like personal growth, personal development, coaching, lifestyle design, it does start to get into gray territory, which is prime time for cults. The NXIVM cult had a sexual component to it as well. Are you familiar with NXIVM or the whole Keith Raniere story?
I've heard of those. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there's a great documentary called The Vow on HBO, which I highly recommend everyone check out, on how a personal growth oriented group turns sexual and then becomes like a really damaging cult that's extremely hard to leave.
And profiteering as well. When it's like, as soon as you start introducing profit, you're like, this doesn't feel right. Something is not feeling right. When you need me to almost sign, we're getting into this more and more in this world where a lot of things that we do feel like multi-level marketing scene where it's like, got to sign up for my subscription now if I want to keep doing this. Or, hey, do you want to upgrade to pro? And then you could do this, this, and this. It's like, we do it in corporate America every day too. But you start mixing that with like personal things. You're like, wait a second, I have to pay money to get to this next level to keep, this doesn't feel right. It's not like a service anymore where it feels like I'm going to see my therapist. I pay you this amount of money for an hour. Then you go, if your therapist was all of a sudden like, well, if you want to get the really good therapy out of me, you got to pay for this next level.
You got to pay for premium.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Then you start going, wait a second, this is, and like you said, that starts feeling more culty and things like that.
Yeah. So I do want to recommend that there was this one facilitator, teacher named Betty Martin. She had this idea called a wheel of consent. I highly recommend people watch her video on YouTube where she's discussing the wheel of consent, because she broke it down in like the way, it was such an amazing way. She has like 4 quadrants basically. And the idea of doing something to somebody and then having something be done to you. So whether you're giving touch or sexual pleasure or whatever it is, or you're receiving it. And then when you're receiving it, there's 2 ways to receive it. One is that this is giving my body, so giving the other person access to me. So even though I'm being done to, I'm the one being massaged and touched, but it's really the other person that's benefiting from that, whether they're getting access to touch my body. And so it's a different way of being is when you're receiving someone's touch. If you've ever been massaged or touched, like you can probably think of it, was it more for them? Were they the ones getting something out of it? Or was it really more for me? And they were doing a service to me. And sometimes when we're receiving that touch, we're often conflicted with feeling guilt, like the person is spending time touching me and making me feel good, but I'm like not doing anything to them. So I feel guilty, or I feel I need to pay them back in some way. So there's all these like mental programs that happen in our minds when we're involved in intimacy like this. So Betty Martin breaks it down to like make you really think about it. Like when you're giving touch, are you doing it for yourself? Are you doing it for them without any attachments? Because sometimes we give to get. We will like give someone a massage and then hope that they do something in return to me later. So we have all these psychological games that we play that interfere with the truth of what's actually happening. And so at events like these cuddle events, they talk about that. And so to me, this is also related to like the BDSM community. So the kink community, fetish community, which I was only temporarily a part of at some point in my life. I explored it a little bit, but what attracted me to this world was the amount of like brainy, insightful knowledge about human sexual dynamics that are never talked about, like in regular, you know, normal relationships. You know, it's like just the psychology of what's going behind giving and receiving, and pleasure, and consent versus implied consent, and what's real and what's not. It's like there's just so many things going on. I mean, so I wanted to just give a shout out to Betty Martin. She was one of the teachers that really inspired me back then.
Well, it is kind of an interesting point as well that I think that you're right that sometimes the intention behind it is that the person doing the touching is getting what they want as opposed to the person being touched. But then you think about the opposite of that, that it's like, well, the opposite can be true as well. The person being touched is the one that is kind of getting their desire filled and all of this, and that's that. And the other person is kind of left on the hook. And, so then which situation are you in that it's not that easy to go down, or putting yourself in a situation either way, because you're like, well, like you said, to pay back. Well, they did this, so I guess I should hang on the hook for that then, type of a thing, and then figuring those situations out. So yeah, no, that is really fascinating.
Huge.
I think that we still have a lot of time here, and so I want to try to get into this because I have a lot of questions here on this as well. Astral projecting, to change gears a little bit. Do you remember the first time that happened? Or is that something where it's like, I think it was around here, because I couldn't necessarily tell anybody the first time that I had a dream. I do it all the time, but I don't know what my first dream was or when it was. Do you remember when it was? And it also seemed right around road trip time that you started to take that a lot more seriously, experiment with that. Am I right there? Or?
Yeah. So to answer your question, the first astral projection experience that I remember having was around 2014, or maybe late 2013. But knowing what it is, I could then think back into my life for times where it happened accidentally and I didn't really know what was going on, or I thought it was a bad dream. But the first time that I knew what it was, and I chose to do it, and it happened, well, I can distinctly remember that. It was more of an accident that it happened, but I was aware of the concept of out of body experiences and astral travel and stuff. So I was like super excited when it did happen. And I can get into that in a minute. But what was you had another question?
Well, and I guess that I'm glad it might be a good place to then stop too. Is then if you want to explain to me and then our audience, what is astral projecting? Is there like an easy definition for that, or?
Yeah, so I think people know what lucid dreaming is. When you become awake or aware in a dream that you're dreaming, but you don't wake up yet. So then now you have this awareness that allows you to interact with your dream, to change it, to do stuff in your dream that you probably wouldn't do if you weren't aware that you were dreaming. You're like, oh my gosh. So like, I know this is a dream. This isn't really real. So then I could like fly or walk through that wall, or change the scene, or fly to the moon, or do whatever you want. And so that's very closely related to an out-of-body experience or astral projection, which are basically the same thing. It just depends on how you enter into that dream state where you're consciously aware. And so lucid dreamers have a technique called reality checks, which they'll, for example, like they'll put their finger through their hand, or if they'll try to, and if it goes all the way through, then they know they're in the dream realm.
Interesting. Okay.
So they train themselves during the day to ask themselves, am I dreaming? Am I dreaming? And they'll do that reality check. Am I dreaming? Okay, I think I'm in physical reality here. But then by making that a habit, they'll probably do it in the dream on accident. They'll do the habit in the dream, and then it'll notice it. Another thing that people do is turn a light switch off and on. In a dream, it doesn't affect the lights, at least majority of the time.
It should, yeah, exactly. Most of the time it wouldn't.
It doesn't. So if you find yourself in a dream, and if you've ever seen Richard Linklater's Waking Life, they get into that. They're like flipping a light switch off and on, and it's not working, and then they're like, "Oh my gosh, this means I'm in a dream." But to get yourself to that point where you feel like you remember that in a dream, that's kind of, you got to have a lot of practice.
Sure.
Daytime practice of pretending that you're in a dream and thinking that I'm like, right now at this podcast, I could be dreaming right now. Let me check, and just to have that question, am I dreaming? Am I dreaming?
Gotcha.
You start to do that in a dream. And then as you do that, you'll wake up in a dream, and then you can control and navigate your dream realms. And what you do there is sky's the limit. But as far as astral projection, that's like I'm going to enter the dream realm through meditation. So I'm going to enter it from waking consciousness and then be conscious the whole time I fall asleep and then project or roll out of your body, or when you transfer into the dream realm from waking consciousness. And so you usually do that when you enter into it, you're often in the same room that you are sitting in or laying in.
Oh,
So
really?
it feels
Interesting.
more like it has the experience of leaving your body. So it feels like you are projecting out, like you are leaving your body, your sleeping body's laying there on the bed, but your awareness and your sense of self is now somewhere else. And you also have an astral body. So you can like look at your hands, look at your astral hands. You can look at yourself in the mirror and there's a form there looking back at you. Whether it reflects your physical body or not is arbitrary. So you do have a second body. And so that's an out of body experience. A real one is when that happens. Now you project into the dream realm. You're in the astral realm now. And there's lots of levels within the astral realm that you can get into that are more dense. Some feel more like physical reality. Some feel more like a spiritual reality where it's like the physical form. You don't even have a form anymore. You are literally just a consciousness.
I was just about to ask that because then I assume I don't know, again, forgive me and the audience for all this because I know very, very little about it. So I'm coming at it from a point of zero education, but 100% curiosity. Is it common to kind of compare it to dreams per se or astral world? Because for me in a dream, I do have a lot of different, you can think of dreams in a lot of different types of ways. When you tell somebody, go, oh, I just had this dream, it's one of those ones that felt real. And then you have other dreams where like, look, I had a dream and I was dreaming, but I wake up and I was like, that was so weird and crazy that nothing about it felt weird or real. And so it gets kind of hard to describe, but it feels sometimes at times that there are different levels of dreams where you're like, no, I was in there. This stuff was happening. That felt like a real person, as opposed to other dreams where like I was going through this and this and that, whatever, and that wasn't
Mhm.
that weird. And you kind of describe it that way, but it does feel like different levels. Is that similar with astral projecting? And is that the kind of way that it's described? Is it always with the dream realm, or is it more described as with the astral realm?
Well, I would say the astral realm and the dream realm are like one and the same. I
Okay,
mean,
you can use
it's
them
it's
interchangeably.
it's a gradation
Okay.
between like because sometimes I think with dreams, a lot of it is like your own subconscious, like you're really interacting with yourself in different ways. Like you said, there's definitely different levels where one feels like you're more aware, you're more conscious of yourself there. It feels more real. Other times it feels very abstract. Like you could be interacting with a monster, or like the situations make a lot of sense in the dream realm, but then when you start to look at it with your waking consciousness, you're like, none of that makes any sense physically. Like, and also the person I'm interacting with turns shape shifts into different forms. Like they could be my girlfriend, and next thing you know, they're like my boss, and then they're also this. So it's kind of like what we're working with is like an archetype that we're projecting onto this figure, and they're changing forms. But really, it's like our own emotional state that's being projected out, and we're working through it in a reality, so to speak. But some of them feel like you're talking to a real person, or you could be expressing opinions and talking to somebody as if you're having a real life conversation that you just like wake up from, and you're like, oh my God, I thought that was real life.
Uh-huh.
So, and I think it just depends on our level of awareness, and it's really hard to pin down. Really, it's in that realm. It's like things are fuzzy, and so the astral is a vast space of our imagination and our dream realm. And if we take our waking consciousness to that realm, which some could say that it's like maybe a part of our brain, maybe like our frontal cortex, like our logical thinking brains, our sense of self, like maybe that turns off or something when we go to sleep and we dream, and then we have like no conscious awareness. We could be interacting with it without any sense of like knowing what reality is or questioning it. But like when that part of our brain turns on in a dream, then we like have this secondary awareness. We do question it. We can interact differently with it. So yeah.
So astral projecting is basically linked to or works around what I would call, or a layman might call, like the dream realm. Like it's
Yes.
based on dreaming. It's not like something where, um, I'm sitting here right now with you and I go, Jeff, I'm going to astral project and pink. And then I'm like gone or something like that. Like that's all like BS stuff that people have like in their head of like, this is not what you think. This is not Doctor Strange, where I'm just sitting there and then my physical, you can see like this spirit come out of me. Like that's not what you're saying or talking about, type of thing, where it's like, when I astral project, you can see my spirit floating around the room. Like that's not what you're getting at.
No, not necessarily, but this gets into this like what really is the difference between waking consciousness and any other consciousness beyond that? Like
Sure.
so like when you do fall asleep and you go into a dream realm, if you are astral projecting, there's many techniques that you could do to try to uh, stay conscious and awake as your body falls asleep, and then you go into
Wait.
what's called sleep paralysis.
Okay.
And
Yeah. Like, sorry. Explain that. Yeah. That's crazy.
so for people who've woken up and they can't move their arm, or they feel like they have this like sense of paralysis, but they're aware they can blink their eyes, but they can't move their body. So that's when the body's asleep. It goes into this mode where you can't really act out your dreams. You know, it's like you're in paralysis, and you're supposed to be dreaming. You're supposed to be asleep. But if you wake up, oftentimes you're like, you wake up before the body's woken up. And so, but when you're in that state, oh,
Hey,
got the
thumbs
thumbs up.
up.
When you're in that state, that's your astral projection zone. Okay. So if you can meditate and fall asleep and relax to the point where your body starts to fall asleep, and you stay conscious, you don't snap out. Most people are going to fall asleep and then forget that they even forget how they got to sleep. You know, that's
Correct.
what happens. But with enough practice, you can remain aware and then catch it when it happens. And so you'll feel your body vibrating and buzzing as what I think is happening is that your energy body or your astral body is becoming like out of sync with your physical body, and it's starting to separate, but it's still like in your body, so to speak. But then
Sure.
when you are moving your arm, sometimes it feels like you're moving your physical arm, but like not to like an outside observer, you're sleeping, but you think that you just moved your physical arm because that's what you experienced. But so you can roll out of your body and you experience you're now in your astral body. You're in the astral plane, and you can interact with it. Now, some people talk about like, okay, remote viewing. That's similar too. It's like, so if I wanted to astral project and then go over to like my neighbor's house and see what they're doing,
Oh,
um,
gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
is that really possible? Well, I had so many astral projecting experiences where I did try that. I went to my neighbor's house and I like even talked with them or something. But like, did I really talk with them? Because sometimes I'd go over there and the experience, it's like, I don't know what their house looks like, but I
Sure.
tried to do things to test this, to see if I'm actually going out and leaving my body and going into the physical world as a spirit and then like
Yeah.
interacting.
A
It's
visible
not really
spirit.
like
Yeah.
that.
Gotcha.
It's
Okay.
not really like that. Like, for example, I can give an example that my ex-wife and I tried to do this test. So I said, okay, I want you to write a note and hide it somewhere in the house, like up where I can't see it. But
Yeah.
I'm going to
Polaroids.
float up there when I'm out of body. I'm going to float up there and read the note and then report back what I find. So she's like, okay. So she wrote something on the note. She put it on top of the bookshelf. And so the next time I had an OBE or an out of body experience, I remembered, and then I went over there to look at it, and I floated up there and I looked at it, and I'm like, it's kind of blurry, and I'm like, what is it? And it's actually what I'm seeing is like an illustration, like a comic book. All of a sudden, I'm seeing like a 4-panel comic book, and it looks like a trampoline, like things are bouncing on the trampoline. I'm like, well, that's weird. Okay, so then I put that aside, and then I woke up, and I told her what I experienced, and she's like, well, that's not quite what I wrote, but it's similar. So I actually looked at the
Interesting.
physical note, and she wrote happy bunnies binkying in the field, like bouncing around, jumping around.
Yeah.
So I saw
Crazy.
something like about bouncing and trampolines, jumping. And so she had a concept that maybe I was picking up on in more of the psychic planes, the
Gotcha.
astral realms, the imaginative realms, where our ideas, thoughts, beliefs, stuff like that comes from, more the finer realms before they get distilled and created in physical material reality or matter. So I may have been connecting psychically with the idea or the essence that she was trying to put out there. And then that's what I picked up on. So it's like lost in translation, like it's not
Sure.
not a perfect model. So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
just one
and
example.
you brought up something that I thought was kind of interesting or that I could relate to. So I want to see if I was understanding you right. When you were talking about the kind of sleep paralysis, when you wake up, can't move your body, can't do anything like that. Are you talking about that in those experiences, those are like, hey, you were like just there, or that's the kind of state of mind that you're in or that your body was in? 'Cause it's like your spirit is still kind of like away a little bit and you opened up your eyes, but you're like, you can't move, can't do it. You don't know where the hell you are. You don't know what the hell you're doing. Can't move anything. Is that kind of what you're talking about? That it was like, hey, you were kind of just somewhere else. Obviously you're not then, you've woken up, but that's a state that you're trying to get in. Is that what you were getting at? Because I was going to say that stuff
Yeah.
happens to me a lot.
Yeah. So if you find yourself in that sleep paralysis state, then you have a higher chance that you'll be able to do astral projection if you practice it. Because
Interesting.
you're already doing it. You just a lot of times you don't know what's happening, and you'll get afraid and try to get yourself out of it rather than staying with the experience and like relaxing. You know.
Yeah. Because for me, a lot of what happens at times is like it really feels like it almost takes me, I'm sure it's much more like seconds, but it feels like minutes to, and I know when it happens to me a lot. It happens to me a lot of times when I am going to sleep when I'm not intending to. And then I'm waking up early, and it might be anywhere from like 30 minutes to a couple hours later. And I wake up and I don't think that it doesn't feel like I'm in the right spot. That I'm like, where am I? This isn't it. This is, what am I supposed to be doing right now? This doesn't feel right. It's not just like it immediately comes back where I'm like, hey, there's the TV. You're in your basement, or something like that. That I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't know what I'm doing. And like you said, that sleep paralysis, I never really thought about it that way until I heard you describe it. So I would have never have said that before, but that's kind of how it feels, where I wake up and doesn't feel like my body can move.
Mhm.
Yeah, it does really feel like and it's almost like, I don't know how to describe it, but it feels like a situation of almost, I guess the best way to describe it is almost like a parallel universe. And then both of those are kind of like, it's kind of dissolving down into where I actually am. Where it's not that I feel like I'm in some weird spot, but I feel like I was off doing something else in a similar space. Like in a dream, I'm sitting in a dream doing this, and then it kind of finally fades. And as I wake up, I go, oh, this is where I am. This is what I
Mhm.
was doing. And you really begin to question of kind of what you brought up before, questioning that reality of like, is this actually even real? This doesn't feel real. And it doesn't feel real at first. It takes a few minutes for it to kind of come down. So that's kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah, and what you describe can also be talked about as a false awakening. There's many times where I feel like I've woken up, and I'll feel certain that I'm in my bed, in my body, and I'll get up and I'll go about my day, and then all of a sudden I wake up again, and now I'm back in my bed. I'm like, none of that was real.
I've
I'm
had
like,
that
I
before.
just
Yeah.
already started getting up and getting ready. It felt like I was doing it, and I've had when I started practicing OBEs a lot, I would have sometimes I would have like 3 or 4 false awakenings in a row. And I'm like, I can't wake up. Like I can't get out into real life. Like
Oh,
so
interesting.
it's kind of like trippy.
It's
And
almost
there's
like an
they probably
Inception style thing.
yes, it's like I'm like looping through wake up experiences and dream realities, and sometimes I'll wake up like what you said, that you felt like you're not in the right place or you're in a different place.
Yeah.
There's times when I'll wake up and I'll actually maybe when I'm sleeping and I'll come out of waking, but then I'll have this certainty that I'm like in my childhood home, for example, and that
Hmm.
like I'll look over and I'll see the closet and I'll see the bed and I'm like, and that's where I am. I am there, and then I'll wake up and I'm like, and then there's like my apartment and I'm like, oh, this isn't where I was. I'm like, so it's weird because your sense of certainty, you feel like you're really there. You don't know what it is. So it's like you're interpreting what you're seeing as reality. But it's not. And then it's like, well, how is that different than right now?
Sure.
So,
And so as we kind of start to wrap things up here, I'm curious, and I'm sure that there's a lot here as well. And so if we need to pick it up, we can. But I'm curious as far as then what do you see as, or what have you gotten out of astral projecting? And say for somebody that was getting into it, what do you see as kind of the purpose of doing it, of practicing it, getting better at it, to have these experiences? What have you been able to get out of it, or what are people getting out of it?
All right, so I first want to say that like before I got into astral projection, I had sleep paralysis experience, but I had what people could call night terrors, which are very frightening, terrifying experiences at night that involve like me not being able to move, me feeling like there's an evil presence in the room that basically I feel like this impending doom, and also I feel like this very profound sense of evil, like it feels like something is sinister that's in the room with me, and so that is very that's that would make me very afraid to try to willingly go into that space where I'm going to experience that. So throughout my life, I had when I sleep with like the blanket wrapped around my head where like my ears aren't exposed and like the only thing that's exposed are like my eyes and my nose, so I can breathe. Or not even my eyes. I'll just like my nose is the only thing exposed so I can breathe. But and oftentimes when I was younger, if I had a night terror, I would wake up and realize that like my hand was out of the blanket, like out the edge of the bed or something, or my foot was exposed, or something would be wrong. And that's what made it different, and then somehow made me experience that sleep paralysis more. Or if I would fall asleep at a different location, I think you mentioned something like that. If you fell asleep when you weren't intending to, like a different time of the day, you're more
Yeah.
likely to have an altered sleep experience. So anyway, when I started meditating and I got into my spiritual practice and learning about this, I said, you know what? If I have another night terror like that, I'm going to practice meditating during. I'm going to try to observe it and be with it rather than try to get out of it. Okay. Now, I was with my ex-wife at the time and we shared a bed together. So there are many times when I would experience something like that in the middle of the night and I could not get out of it. I could not wake myself up out of it. There'd be this terror in the room, or I'd be experiencing something really scary or frightening. Trying to get out. I'm trying to wake myself up. I can't move. And so she hears me like groaning and making these really scary sounds.
Well,
And she tries to wake me up and I can feel her pushing me, but I still can't get out of it. I'm like stuck and I can't get out of it. I'm trying and I'm almost like saying, thank you, help me, trying to get somebody to pay attention to wake me up out of this. And then she eventually would. And then and then all of a sudden everything would feel clear again and there would be no scary thing. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm awake finally. Yeah, and I would have this like, you saved my life. Thank you so much. It's like, so why would I ever want to go into that willingly? But through the meditation,
sure.
um, and this new profound sense of like purpose of truth and exploration of like my deepest, darkest self, like what is really real, it became a desire. I want to explore what happens in this very weird state of my mind, of mystic, of what's really happening. So because I had that intense desire to explore it, I think that fueled my ability to have one. I think you really need to have a strong desire to experience it for you to go through the practice of getting to that, having that experience. So next time I had one, it was accidental. I was sitting on my couch while in the morning while getting ready for work. And so I wasn't intending to fall asleep, but I was like really drowsy and I just let myself kind of doze off. And I noticed the signs, my body started to vibrate like this. And I was like, and I felt the fear. It was like immediately the fear was like right there. But instead of being scared and trying to get out of it and wake myself up, I said, oh, interesting. And I was like, and I just like stayed present. I was still. And then like I let myself relax and I felt my body kind of float like this slowly out like a mist. And then I was like at the same view as the coffee table. I was like, I could see the coffee table from like underneath it. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I like stood up, like, so I stood up and then I'm like standing outside of my body. I'm like in my living room. I'm like, oh my God, I'm having an out of body experience. And I was so excited. All of a sudden the energy was full of joy, full of excitement. And I was like, and I just like ran down. I was going to go like tell my ex-wife, I was going to go tell her.
Uh-huh.
And then so she like walks into the hallway and then I end up like passing through her like a ghost. I'm like, whew, like we just like, oh, she didn't
Crazy.
even notice me. She didn't even
Yeah.
notice me. Okay. And then all of a sudden I got like really sexually aroused. I was like, whoa, I'm horny all of a sudden.
Uh,
My God. And then like I got excited and I woke back up in my body. And I was like, I opened my eyes. I'm still on the couch and I was like, holy shit. Cause I remember that from start to finish. Like
yeah.
that was real. So that's why I got obsessed with it. And I started trying to practice that on a regular basis to recreate that experience. And I ended up doing it. And now I got to go out and explore. But to your question, what is the point of all of this? Well, for me, it helped me explore this terrifying experience that I got to sort of overcome, because once I became aware of it, the fear stopped. I was able to transcend it, go past this barrier, and that fear was almost like blocking me from going out of body and exploring these other realms and all of that. So I felt like I've mastered something in a way, like a part that was really scary. I kind of got control over, or whatever. I understand it more, and um, it it really really transformed my perception of what is real. I like that I'm not just a physical body having a physical experience that's named Jeff Finley, that has a life that only is like, you know, 70 years long or whatever the case.
Sure.
I am way much more than that. And so like that was kind of living proof that like that a lot of these things that people talk about is actually true.
And so were you able, how are the night terrors, if at all, affecting your life these days? Is it a factor at all or not necessarily?
Not really at all. There are times when I will wake up or I will have an experience where it's like pure brainstem fear, just like full of adrenaline, full of
Sure.
fear. And there's like a dark presence. Nothing I can see, nothing I can like look at, but it just feels like a dark shadow corner of the room has an evil entity in that part. But like I don't really experience it very often anymore. And if I do, I have a lot stronger presence, a lot stronger sense of my heart, my true self, that like it doesn't really affect me as much. But sometimes that fear is just like so all consuming that it's like you're just in that state. So I don't really experience night terrors in the same way that I used to. Definitely not.
Did you ever find any, I know these are kind of two different things, but I think you'll see what the question will make sense here in a minute why I'm prefacing it, that I'm not trying to mix spirits with
Hmm.
it. But did you find certain areas or locations it was stronger? Meaning like, hey, whenever I'm over there, it feels worse. Or, for whatever reason, if I'm sleeping this way, it's never as bad. And so maybe it's location, maybe it's how I'm sleeping, maybe it's what I'm sleeping in. Was that ever a factor? And I guess what I'm getting is then it's kind of implying like spirits are sitting in this room, per se, which for me personally, I was always skeptical of that. I was like, you know, um, a ghost is tied to, for lack of a better term, a ghost or a spirit is tied to a location or an object. I'm
Hmm.
like, they're not free to leave that room. I was like, they wouldn't be, confined by the wood of this house type of a thing. But it does seem like a lot of people would talk about, hey, in that area, it feels more spooky per se. Did you ever have anything like that
Yeah.
where certain areas were worse than others or anything?
Well, that's a really thought-provoking question. I think that there's some truth to what you're saying. Now, I haven't really thought about that necessarily when I'm doing my astral projections or whatever, but I do notice that, like, if I change environments, if I go sleep at a friend's house or something like that, or if I'm staying the night at Kara's house or something, like, I have a higher chance of doing it because the environment is unfamiliar. I think my ability to feel safe and relaxed is like is slightly off. I might have more of a hyper vigilant consciousness, and that hypervigilance often is like allows me to stay present and stay conscious when I'm falling asleep. And I'll have weird sleep experiences too. When Kara and I were first dating and we would stay at each other's houses, like I had so many weird experiences because of that. It's like I could not sleep. I was just hypervigilant. And that
Yeah,
could be explained by, PTSD or complex PTSD and trauma from my early life and childhood trauma, stuff like that. It's like why I feel hypervigilant and I can't ever relax. And I have these sleep issues. I have a tendency to do OBEs and astral projection because of trauma. Because it's very common for people who have been traumatized to have a proclivity for out of body experiences, often beyond out of their control. They're not trying to do it, but like a loud noise might send them out of body, and
interesting.
then they're like observing themselves, and then they like get back in their body. They're like they have a hard time being in their body because of the trauma they experienced, as like it was a defense mechanism at the time. So, yeah.
Interesting. I think that that's a good place for us to kind of wrap things up here. That was, I still have so many more questions. I can't wait to
I
talk.
know, Zach. I would love to answer all your questions. So-
This has been one of my more favorite episodes that we've got to do because it's extraordinarily enlightening, I think, as well. And to
Mhm.
hear that and what that means and all of that, because like I said, I think a lot of people, and that's what I've seen. And I remember at WMC Fest kind of thinking this as well. I was like, I feel like a lot of people are making this out like a movie or like a comic book, but that's not really what's being said. That's not really what's happening per se that we all, and everybody's like, oh, do that. And I'm like, no, let's actually try to understand this and see what it's trying to say here alongside, because
Hmm.
it's really fascinating. It's like, and even if it's never happened to you or you have no interest in doing it, it's still a fascinating thing. And so hearing some of those things that I can relate to, that I'm like, I've never found myself needing to or with the ability to describe it, until we kind of started talking today, where I was like, that is kind of how this feels. I've never really been able to describe what that was like, but have that happen very, very strong. I wouldn't necessarily call it an out of body experience, but like I said, it sounds like maybe the beginnings of what you were talking about there, where I was like, it just doesn't feel like I was in this spot, almost like two different realities merging together, two different Zachs. Like this other
Hmm.
Zach was awake, but I was in his body. And then he's falling asleep and waking up in my realm type of a thing. It's almost like how it feels. And I'm like, I'm crossing over to some other weird realm. So it's really fun talking about it. Anyway,
No, that is really cool, Zach. I think, almost anybody I've talked to has had paranormal type experiences in their life that they just don't have an answer for or an explanation for, or maybe they'll watch a show and they think it's a ghost, or they'll just have like a really mundane explanation for it, or even a superstitious explanation for it, but they haven't really done real research into like maybe what is really happening there. Like I remember I used to have these experiences, but like I had an atheist perspective or an agnostic perspective, more
sure.
like it's probably something happening with the brain and blah. That just like it's like full stop. You don't need to explain it. But having these experiences made me start to be interested in other people's paranormal experiences. Like I didn't have any alien abduction experiences in my life, but with some doing the astral projection stuff, I've had some weird experiences that I'm like, oh shit, like I can totally see that. Like
Maybe, yeah.
it's suddenly this stuff has an explanation, and
Uh,
that the people who are talking about seeing a being in their room or who takes them up to the ship, and they believe the story like full consciousness, like they had an experience. Like maybe you don't, maybe you haven't had that experience, but like to them it was real. So I just started to feel fascinated by people's stories and like
well, and I
yeah.
think for me personally, and hopefully the listeners can take this away as well, is that for me personally, especially after this episode, to me, you come across as very much almost like a skeptical point of view, with a, here's how my experience was, here's how this was. Because I remember even you talking about like a lot of people think maybe the frontal cortex is shutting off and all of that, it sounds very relatable. And so to me, I was like, man, if I was looking to get coached in this area, have somebody to relate to know more information, I would be calling you in a heartbeat. Then I'm like, Jeff really seems to know his stuff here. So people listening, if that is the case, maybe you should reach out for coaching to Jeff, because that's definitely the impression that I get from that as well. It's a very almost like scientific yet open metaphysical point of view, which I
Mm.
appreciate.
Yeah, very
That
cool.
being
Yeah.
said, let's talk about inspiration for the week. Anything inspiring happening for you this week? Any
Uh,
documentaries, movies, artists, conversations?
um, the only thing that was on my list was, well, two things. And I don't think they're really that inspiring, but one of them was WordPress related because I've been in that rabbit hole a little bit. There was like this WordPress speed build challenge on YouTube that I saw that was pretty inspiring. We can link to that in the show notes, but it's essentially like two guys are being timed for 30 minutes and they have to like recreate a website within the WordPress block editor, like
Oh,
to see
cool.
if they can do it. And
Uh-huh.
and so that was eye opening for me as somebody who's trying to figure out how to do my new website. And then the second thing, this is not exactly inspirational, but it was healing for me. So I have suffered a long time with a little bit of skin picking compulsion, where like I will like pick the sides of my fingers like neurotically without even
Uh-huh.
realizing I'm doing it, and then I realize I'm bleeding, and I'm like, oh shit, and I'm embarrassed. So this picking at my cuticles and my nails and my skin has been something I've struggled with for like as long as I can remember. And I think in 2014, I learned that it was called dermatillomania, and that I wasn't the only one with this problem. And but like even that knowledge didn't stop me from having from being able to stop doing it. And so over the years I've struggled with it and tried to do things. And I've also learned that it's related to OCD and other like uh neurotic disorders like that, anxiety, OCD,
Mhm.
and also perfectionism. It's a lot. It's really
Oh,
linked to
interesting.
that.
Okay.
So I saw this one video, I think it was from the School of Life on YouTube, and they talked about skin picking, and it was like really, really relatable. It was like a little animation about what it's like to be inside the head of somebody who does this compulsively. And so I found a lot of healing and other people who do it that are way worse than me. I'm like, they got it bad. Like they're picking all sorts of parts of their body, they're pulling out their hairs, they they're bleeding all over, their skin looks terrible. So I don't have it as much, but what I learned through watching that was like, okay, I know that when I'm doing this, there's some sort of unconscious fear or unconscious anger or something that I'm not expressing that's I don't have access to. So I try to stop and I'll try to think, am I actually afraid of something? And oftentimes there is something, yes, there is something I'm afraid of that I'm not dealing with. And so I've been trying to deal with that and trying to stop doing the picking, which is like releasing some tension and soothing me a little bit, even though it's making my skin look bad. But I've
Yeah.
had a good week where my skin's looking pretty good this week.
Nice. I like to hear that.
So
Um,
not exactly the most inspirational comment, but
no, that's big steps. I'm sure a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, that's right. Yeah. Maybe they can find some inspiration there from your story as well. Anybody in similar
I hope
situations.
so.
I had a nice, I went to, we started a motion graphics meetup here in Colorado.
Cool.
It's mainly geared for all of that. And it's kind of just turned more into video people, but even it's now widening to kind of like creatives, graphic designers are starting to show up, things like that. Anybody in the creative realm. And there was a guy that did a nice talk out there, but I met a couple that had just moved up from Austin. So they were, I think, New York for a little bit, but I think they've been in Austin, I think they said for like 10 years, something like that. And they were doing some really cool stuff as well. And so it was fun that while I was a video generalist, and I consider myself to be that, I'm fascinated by the few things that I've never messed around with. And they were doing a lot with light projecting, like on a building or on an object and running video and stuff through all of that. And then it was really fun and inspiring hearing about how that stuff is built out. And they really had that same spirit that, I think a lot of times people hear this, including myself, which again is kind of the impetus for this project or this podcast, where people will say, oh, I just went and then I figured it out. And I'm like, you're leaving a lot out there. What do you mean you just figured it out? Like, it's not that
Right.
simple. And I get skeptical, but then I think about times that I was like, even what I was talking about earlier, the Snapchat filter, I'm like, well, I just went and figured it out. I went and learned it. And yes, I can expand on that. And so it was interesting to hear them that they got into light projecting for that exact same reason. They just needed to figure it out. And they're like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure I can do that. And we'll buy a projector and I'm sure I can figure out the software and all this. Like, we'll just figure it out. And for me, that is something that I'm like, I would never say that I think I could just figure it out. Like if somebody asked me to go and do that, I'm like, no, I don't do that. Like it just seems way too intimidating to me. But for
Mhm.
them, that's kind of what happened. And then they went in. So it was a nice reminder for me again that, there are ways that you can push yourself, that you can do that and that you have done that might seem easy, but then trying to tap into that in other ways that it's like, no, I've done that before. And for me, it might have seemed easy at the time, but for somebody else, they might be saying, how can you just stop and say, I'll figure it out? And to maybe push myself sometimes to try new things, try that out and try to really get yourself in a place where, yeah, you can figure this out. You can do that. What is something that you've always wanted to do? And then try to go, figure that out. So it was really nice, chatting with them. So that was great.
So was that the first time you attended this
No,
group?
so these started about 10 years ago. And when it first
Uh,
started, it was it was like 7 people in a coffee shop. And they're just waiting for somebody to walk in that's like, that looks like they don't know where they're supposed to be. And they're like, hey, are you here for the motion graphics meetup? And they're like, yeah, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. We're over here. And then all it was like, we're sitting down having a cup of coffee. And then somebody who was pretty well known in the era um, came across, for me, I think this is when it took off. This was maybe 5 to 7 years ago. I don't remember, but there's this guy. His name is Nick Campbell, and he runs a company called Grayscale Gorilla. And Grace,
Oh, Grayscale Gorilla.
yeah.
Yeah, I know
Oh,
that.
you know that? Yeah. So he runs Grayscale Grill. They got Nick Campbell to come out here to one of the MoGraph meetups. I think he just happened to be in town, and it might have been by, I would butcher his last name, but everybody knows him as EJ. EJ is a big Cinema 4D guy, did a lot of work with Grayscale Gorilla, now does work with School of Motion website. They do a lot of like training for video people. And have a pretty successful business. He's out here in Colorado. So I don't know if he's the one that got him out here or not. But Nick came by, and with those names, all of a sudden, like 80 people were there. And it was like, I was like, I didn't even think that there were this many MoGraph people in Colorado, like, let alone
Right.
like, yeah, and we're kind of talking Denver metro area. And I was like, this is crazy. And in some ways, it was really inspiring. And in other ways, for me, you know, I started to get the feeling sometimes that I get when I watch, say, like an Avengers movie, and you see 9 names across the screen flat. That's just like rows and rows and rows of people doing the effects and 3D design for these movies, where I get depressed, where I'm like, there's so many people out there doing this that are not getting paid enough, that are great at doing this, that are kind of like slave laboring it through it. And it's like, it
Really?
becomes kind of uninspiring for me, where I'm like, oh man. And, or I get to the point where I'm like, I'm never going to be good enough. I cannot compete with this many people. You know, I thought that maybe I was really on top of my game, but look at how many other people are here, and I don't know if I can stay on top of this. So very inspiring and uninspiring, mostly inspiring. It's a really good thing. So that was a while ago, and then ever since then, EJ moved out to Colorado, I think from Chicago, and he's kind of been keeping it going ever since. And I hadn't been going for a long time. The last time I went, I think was like 7 years ago, and then saw a talk that I thought might be helpful, and kind of had an idea for some stuff. And so I was like, oh, I want to go out there and talk to some of these people. And went back. So yeah, I recommend, if you're in the Colorado area, look up the MoGraph meetups here, even if you're just a creative. I think it's a good networking opportunity, and they meet about once a month. It's nice that they do that. Yeah.
Where do they meet now? What kind
So
of
now they
venue?
meet at this place called Ratio Beer Works. And it's a great fun setting because it's a brewery, but the brewery is kind of set up a back room, and there's a screen back there. There's microphones, speakers, all of this, and they can fit probably about 40 people in chairs back there. But it's where they store their kegs and all of this. It's kind of a back room that they've also made kind of a little party room as well. And even calling it a party room is overselling it. It's not a party room, but it is a nice space to do a meetup like this. So every month they usually go to this brewery, and in the back of the brewery, there's a bunch of creatives hanging out, where everybody else is up front having a bunch of beers. We're in the back talking about creative things and how to work in the business and stay in the business and network and all this. And it's pretty fun.
That's cool. I wish there was something like that for me to attend here locally, but I thought, am I supposed to be the one to start it? What do I do? Like at a coffee shop? Like, I used to attend this divorce group when I first moved to Dayton, because I just thought, like, well, I've got experience with that and I can help people, and I thought it'd be great to attend and see what other people are going through. And they just met at this coffee shop. And that's where they still meet. But like, I don't know if do I want to do that? Like, I did start a meetup group when I was in Austin for Starseeds, and it just kind of turned out to be not so great.
Oh, gotcha.
The people that were initially drawn to attending an event about starseeds were kind of interesting people that I'm like, oh god, I can't deal with this every week. Like,
Yeah.
oh no, I don't want to be the leader of this. I can't wrangle these people in.
Uh,
They're like looking for someone to talk to about their space cadet experiences. And I'm like,
yeah.
okay, no offense towards them.
Yeah,
Great
exactly.
people, but I didn't know if I had the conviction to run the meetup group every week, so like, I don't really want to be the person to run it, but like, I want to see it created. Like, I would love to be able to attend an event for creatives of all sorts, like what you're talking about, and network and connect and talk shop and see if anybody needs help with this or that, and see if we can collaborate. I
Yeah.
don't know. That's a cool idea. So it's great to hear that you found something like that you're attending and you really like it and you've watched it grow over the years.
Well, and it was interesting because when I went, I was actually thinking about you, and I had a concept that would be kind of fun, that if you and I were presenting together, that I was like, if Jeff is ever out in Colorado, I was like, we should try to go present at one of these meetups. And it was along the lines of like, staying creative, talking shop, seeing if anybody needs help. Is that I was the kind of idea behind it was it'd be great to have just something general on creativity. And I haven't fleshed out the idea, so it's not like, oh, Jeff, this is how it would go. But it was just somewhere along the lines of like trying to talk about creativity, how we find inspiration in the day and all of that. But then also realizing, hey, we're all here together. We've got people that are at the top of their game, veterans. And we have people that are just starting out, that are trying to figure out this game. And probably there's a lot more people just starting out that are coming to this meetup type of a thing, or trying to wade their way through it. There's probably not a ton of a lot of the veterans are like, I know what I'm going to get out of this and all of that. But to try to partner them up in a way that is respectful of both people, that is like, hey, what would you think if there was a new person that's making something for their demo reel or for their portfolio, and they can email you and you can provide feedback for them, or a little bit of direction, or, hey, here's how you could get started. To bring that community together where, hey, it's not really taking any time from the veteran, but you're helping somebody out that now gets some coaching, some help, some inspiration. And that can help you out as a person growing. How do I coach? How do I do this? Can I explain things? Because usually I always see it as your ability to explain something shows that you've mastered it, that you truly understand it. If you can explain it to somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, you're truly a master in that arena, type of a thing. So it's helpful for the veterans, but not a lot of skin off their back. But now somebody that's new can be like, oh, I have a mentor. I have somebody that can help me. And sure, it's not like some big commitment where like you need to stay with them for 2 or 3 years, but maybe you guys do mesh. Maybe that guy in 5 years is going to go, I know who's perfect for this. Jeff helped me out on that. Let me throw a job his way, type of a thing, or vice versa. Like, oh, there was this kid. I remember he was really good at character design. Man, he'd be great for this project. Let's go get him in here. But really much more of a committed type of a thing where some of those people could find a way, and those young youths out there and those people just starting off could maybe have that courage to take that next step. Because I know for me, when I was first getting started, I was very, very afraid to even take a step. As dumb as that sounds, that it was like, I was afraid to go work on a project every day because I hated the work that I was doing. And I was like, I didn't like it, so I would scrap it. And then I was like, that sucked. That's no good. And then it did not inspire me to work the next day on it. But if I maybe had somebody, the projects that I did work on, I had somebody with me going like, no, that's good, man. That's good. What if you did this and just push that button and go, oh, is that how I do that? They go, yeah. I was like, that was 5 minutes of their time that basically sent me down a path of a career path. And I always thought that'd be fun to do. That I was like, that's how, you and I never worked on a project together, but that's why it came up and why we're on the podcast. Is that for me back in the day, I remember as I'm just getting into design, like Jeff Finley was the god in design at that time. And it really had an artistic taste that really connected with me at the time as well. And like, even it had a very music inspired kind of grunge, distressed feel. But I loved the work that you did. And so even though you and I never really connected, it felt like almost like a little mentorship for me as I went along, and I could follow your life to go through. And I was like, oh, that would be fun then for Jeff and I to talk about that, for other people. And so that was that. So if you're ever out here, we gotta do something together on that.
Well, dude, that sounds like a great idea. I'm like super interested. I just don't have any money to afford a plane ticket.
That's what I was like. If you ever road trip out here, we gotta get you out for you.
Or unless you could find a sponsor or something who would be interested in paying us to do a presentation, then fly me out, put me in a hotel. I'll be happy to do it. If we got a sponsor for it or something, that'd be cool.
No, that's a great idea though. Should start looking for a sponsor. I should go talk to EJ about that. So yeah.
Yeah. Work with the creative group that you're a part of, see if they know anybody would want to sponsor that. And, maybe we can make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. That would be great. Well, good times. Anything else you want to share before we kick this thing down?
Nope, I'm good. I think that's all I've got today.
Perfect. Well, everybody, we appreciate you sticking with us throughout that. We'd love it if you would like and subscribe. Definitely helps us out. Leave us a comment. We appreciate that as well. Look us up on YouTube or wherever else you all get your podcasts. Otherwise, we will see you next week for We Should Be Working. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
That's stupid. I'm not doing that.